Hello, you're about to hear Good Morning Seminole, our monthly signature event. Please enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Like I said, you're about to listen to three lawyers talking. What did you do wrong today? I don't know. At least it's free. We're not usually free. So I know a lot of lawyers in town. New member, I do not know you. Let's meet after. But I'm very excited to learn along with you about our panelists who I want to introduce. First is Blaise Trettis, who is the public defender for the 18th Judicial Circuit, and he has been doing that since 2012. And next, I'd like to introduce William Scheiner, who is the state attorney of the 18th Judicial Circuit, and he has been doing that since 2008. Okay, we're here to learn, gentlemen. So let's start with the basics. Can each of you give us a quick overview of what each of you does?
Okay, good morning. I'm Blaise Trettis, the public defender for Brevard and Seminole counties. The public defender and state attorney are elected positions. It is partisan. I am a Republican. I've been the elected public defender for about 12 and a half years. I've made my career in criminal law. I've been a lawyer for 37 years. The public defender represents people in criminal cases who cannot afford to hire a private attorney. The public defender system was created in 1963 as a result of a Florida case called Gideon versus Wainwright, which went to the United States Supreme Court. Clarence Gideon was a low-level thief, and he was arrested for burglary of a pool hall in Pensacola. He could not afford a lawyer, so he was easily convicted, representing himself, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He appealed his case himself in his handwritten petition to the United States Supreme Court, at which the United States Supreme Court held that under the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution, that in felony cases, if you could not afford a lawyer from that point on, the government would have to hire a lawyer to represent you. In quick succession, the United States Supreme Court then held that in misdemeanor cases, if you could not afford a lawyer, the government would have to hire a lawyer to represent you. In juvenile delinquency cases, and even in civil commitment mental health cases where your liberty was taken away, the government would have to appoint a lawyer to represent you. So the underlying basis is that any time that your liberty could be taken from you, any time you could be put in jail, prison, or in a mental institution against your will, if you could not afford a lawyer, the government would have to provide a lawyer to represent you, and that is how the public defender system was created in Florida in 1963. I think Florida has a very good public defender system. There are 20 judicial circuits in Florida, so there are 20 public defenders and 20 state attorneys. This circuit is Brevard and Seminole counties, which is a very strangely drawn judicial circuit. If you look on the map, there's a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but the Constitution says that judicial circuits, the counties have to be contiguous, they have to touch each other. And at the time, Brevard and Seminole County actually did not. So they changed the boundaries to actually touch each other in the middle of the St. Johns River, southeast of Geneva, so that there could be a judicial circuit. Why it happened, politics is the basis for a lot of things that happen, right? So I think at the time, decades ago, that Seminole County probably did not want to be subsumed by Orange County, the huge population. So to even that out, it was Brevard and Seminole. So I represent people in the Public Defender's Office in Brevard and Seminole counties. We represent probably 70 to 75% of all criminal defendants because they cannot afford to hire a private attorney. That's 26,000 people per year. It's a big office, 66 lawyers in Brevard and Seminole County. 70% of their cases are in Brevard County, only 30% in Seminole County. That's good for Seminole County because Seminole County has a very, very low crime rate. Brevard County does as well. One thing I'll point out, which many people don't realize, because when they see on the news, they think that crime must be just terrorizing the Central Florida and Florida because it always leads off with a murder case or something else. But actually, the crime rate is at a historical low. As long as statistics have been done about 50 years, this is the lowest crime rate in history. So that's very good for all of us. The Public Defender's Office, who appoints the people to the Public Defender, that's the clerk of the court. They have a financial affidavit the defendants have to fill out. They review it, and if they determine they're indigent, then they appoint the public defender. I'll point out also that the public defender office is not entirely free. There is a $50 charge for the appointment, then a $50 or $100 fee at the end of the case, which sounds minimal, and it is minimal when you consider how expensive it is to hire an attorney. However, those fees generate almost $1 million in my office every year, which fund about 10% of my budget, so that's very helpful. And I don't want to use all the time, so I'll turn over the microphone to my counterpart state attorney.
Good morning, everyone. My name is William Scheiner. I'm the elected state attorney for Brevard and Seminole County, also a Republican. I am one of 20 elected state attorneys in the state of Florida. As Mr. Trettis said, there are 20 circuits. I'm one of the 20. It's actually, I think, a grain of sand in the St. Johns River that touches Brevard County, actually, is the most recent story I've heard. At the state attorney's office, we prosecute all criminal cases that happen, anything from a driving offense, driving on a suspended license, all the way up to first-degree murder. We have attorneys that handle all those things. We also handle Baker Act hearings, delinquency, juvenile delinquency cases, and we do those on a daily basis. All the attorneys in our office either do things from charging decisions where the police make an arrest, the file comes to our office for an intake posture. The arrest standard is probable cause. The filing standard is a good faith basis to believe we can prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. The filing decision is made, and then the case transfers on to one of our other divisions, whether it's our early resolution department, where we make early plea offers at the beginning of the case to try to resolve the case quickly and efficiently and without the expenditure of resources and money. If it doesn't get resolved there, the case will move on to a trial division where one of the trial lawyers, either here in Seminole County or Brevard County, will handle the case. Roughly 130, 120 lawyers across the counties, both counties. As Mr. Trettis said, 70% of my office staff is in Brevard County, maybe 65 to 35 here in Seminole County. And they handle the case from beginning to end, doing motion practice, depositions, pretrial hearings, and trials. This year I ran some stats. We're at 70 jury trials across the circuit. 15 of them have been homicide offenses with a roughly 80% conviction rate. As Mr. Trettis says, crime is down. The dockets are up. Each of my lawyers handle roughly 150 cases apiece, and each docket has close to 1,000 cases on it. There are four criminal circuit dockets. Those are cases that are felony cases here in Seminole County and 5 in Brevard County, and each of those are staffed with multiple lawyers handling different things from child abuse cases to career offenders to homicides and entry-level felonies. But any case that's arrested, anybody that's arrested, that case comes through our office for prosecution and disposition.
All right, thanks, guys. Now, both of you worked at your offices before your current roles. Why did you take a career in public practice instead of private practice?
Well, for me, I just needed a job, quite frankly.
I support that.
When I graduated, well, first of all, I did want to be a trial attorney. I did not want to be a transactional attorney. I wanted to be in the courtroom trying cases, so I geared my law school experience towards that. I interned at the state attorney's office. And out of law school, or during law school, I interviewed both at the state attorney's office and the public defender's office. I would have been glad to do either. The public defender was my first job offer, so I took it. And that's how my career started there. I always did like defending people, though. I like the mission of the public defender's office, being able to provide legal services to people who cannot afford that. That has always appealed to me. But it is a very difficult job, I will tell you, that it's very stressful, high pressure. People's lives are sort of in your hands, and especially right out of law school when you're completely new, and you get promoted very quickly in the public defender's office. We have attorneys who are promoted from the county court misdemeanor division to the felony division, where they'll represent people who are facing life in prison or are sentenced to life in prison, 13, 14 months out of law school. And they have to pick the juries and get up in front of crowds and cross-examine witnesses, and you have clients who can be very difficult. Going into the jail is a very difficult thing. It's also sort of good in a sense that you get to appreciate your freedom when you go into jails and see the conditions and what it's like there. You know, that's one, I guess, benefit of actually being a criminal defense attorney is how much you appreciate freedom. But it's our job to provide due process and protect the constitutional and procedural rights of all our clients, and that is our mission, and to keep the confidences of our client as well, and to try to get our clients the best outcome that is possible. And, you know, I always like to tell people that a criminal defense attorney does not defend the crimes themselves. In other words, I don't defend the crime of murder or leaving the scene of an accident with injuries. I defend a person charged with that crime, and I do it on a case-by-case basis. I try to hire the best lawyers that I can hire and also provide them with a very good training and mentorship in the office so that 13 months out of law school, when they get promoted to the felony division and they're representing people who are sentenced to life in prison, that they have at least protected their constitutional rights to the best of their ability.
So
thank you.
I became a prosecutor and went to government service work. My road is the road less traveled, and I wouldn't recommend it. I was in college, actually. It was my first year of college, and I was going to school to be a high school history teacher, focusing on Civil War Reconstruction era. And I wanted to also be a high school basketball coach. That's what I wanted to do. I love basketball, wasn't particularly good at it, but the X's and O's I knew pretty well. And while I was in college, I actually got robbed. I was working to pay my way through college, and I ended up being the victim of an armed robbery and ultimately got shot twice. And at that moment, I was 19 years old, and I got thrust into the criminal justice system, and I started meeting lawyers, both criminal defense lawyers and prosecutors. I started meeting victim advocates, judges, police officers, detectives, deposed, and I started seeing things happen. And, you know, I'm a first year at UCF. Go Knights, charge on. Yeah. And, you know, while I'm going through this process, I start following things on the clerk's webpage to see what's happening, and there was this motion that was filed. It was called a motion for youthful offender sanctions, and I didn't know what it meant. And I called the state attorney's office. I got a hold of my advocate. She started talking to me about what it was, giving me some information. And then I was sitting at the student union over at the UCF campus, and a friend of mine said, you know, you should go talk to the professor that I have for my criminal law class. He's a criminal defense lawyer in Orlando, and I'm sure he'd help you. So I went and talked to him, and he explained to me kind of the process, what that meant, what it was. And then he said, you know what, you should take my class. And so the very next semester, I hopped into his class, and I started taking classes with him. And then I started going to court appearances, and I said, you know what, I can do that. I can represent people that have been harmed, victims, and things like that. So I changed my major and set my sights on law school for the specific purpose to do criminal law and specifically prosecution. When I came out of law school, though, it was not the exact, the economy wasn't great, 07. Coming out of there, and I was trying, like Mr. Trettis was trying to find a job. Mr. Trettis probably doesn't remember this. I told him this a few events ago that he actually interviewed me. And I took the first job offer I got, and it wasn't from Mr. Trettis. And I had no intentions of leaving. And Mr. Trettis, frankly, was right. He looked across the table to me and he said, sir, everything you have done has been geared towards prosecution work. You're basically built for that, and that's what I'm here to do. And you know, I want to make sure victims are represented, and that's why I got into this career, and that's why I'll continue to do it. Like Mr. Trettis said, you know, our obligation is to make sure that people that are charged with a crime are charged with a crime appropriately and fairly. If law enforcement does their job right, Mr. Trettis and I are not upset that someone goes to prison. If law enforcement does their job wrong, then that person should not be convicted of anything if the police are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's our role. We're all part of this machine, this criminal justice machine that requires ethical and trained and skilled lawyers on both sides in order for the system to work appropriately. And we're very lucky here in Seminole and Brevard County that we have that in both our offices.
Thanks for sharing, both of you sharing that. It's an interesting story. I get to see on the civil court side how budget cuts and how decisions that are made affect the civil courts. I'm sure it affects you all even more. What do you believe are issues that are coming that could affect the performance of the courts and the ability for you all to do your important jobs in the coming years?
I think the biggest challenge is the ability to hire lawyers who will work in the public defender's office. It really has been an amazing turn of events. Before COVID, everything seems to be before COVID and after COVID, at least in the law profession from my perspective, because before COVID, I would easily get probably 8 applications for every vacancy that I had, and I would get to interview 6, 7 people to make a hiring decision. After COVID, I am lucky if I get 1 application per vacancy. It's very, very difficult to hire people out of law school, hire lawyers, and the salary has gone up a lot. I think before COVID, the starting salary was about $50,000. Now it's $70,000, and I still get no applicants out of law school. And that's a very, very serious problem because these are just the most critical functions. The prosecution and defense are incredibly important. The criminal justice system cannot operate without prosecutors and without defenders. So I definitely think that is the most serious threat to the justice system, and it has been really for the last few years, and it doesn't seem to be getting better either. I don't really know why this has occurred. I really think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are civil law firms now that hire out of law school and allow their attorneys to work remotely. And you think about it, a lot of people would rather work at home rather than go into an office every day, 8 o'clock till after 5 o'clock, and go into jails and have clients who are hard to deal with and the stress and all that. So all of these factors have made hiring just very, very difficult, and I definitely think that is the biggest challenge to the criminal justice system, probably from the prosecution side and the defense side. The other part of it is, the legislature. It's easy for the legislature to pass bills that make the sentences harder every year, and we're used to that. It's been going on probably for the last 25, 30 years, but we're just used to that. That's another difficulty. And people may not realize this, but Florida has an extremely harsh sentencing scheme by statute. A lot of times people think, well, the judge will decide what your sentence is. That is actually not true. The Florida legislature has passed a law called the Criminal Punishment Code. It's a scoring system based on the seriousness of the offense, your prior record, whether anyone was injured or not, or killed, was anyone on probation when the crime was committed. All these add up to points, and the points basically determine a lowest permissible sentence that the judge can impose. And if that lowest permissible sentence is 15 years in prison, then 15 years is the bottom, but the judge can go to the maximum, perhaps life in prison, depending on what the maximum punishment is. So it's a very harsh, tough sentencing system, which makes things incredibly difficult. I guess on the upside, that maybe is why we have such a low crime rate, quite frankly. But but I think the biggest challenge for sure from the defense side is just we're just almost not able to hire lawyers anymore. It's becoming extremely difficult.
And I would echo what Mr. Trettis said. It's really is exactly that. It's getting some lawyers in here that are going to handle some very serious offenses, serious cases, and do it at a high level, and get them to compete with the civil firm that's offering them 6 figures with a law school degree. But not only 6 figures, they get to work from home, and they can do it from the comfort of their living room or their dining room table. Whereas, we're trial law firms, and we're in the courtroom every day, 5 days a week, and we're asking these lawyers to handle hundreds and hundreds of cases, and that's difficult to do. To say to them, hey, we're going to offer you $70,000 a year, we're going to give you really good health benefits, and we're going to give you a pension, which not a lot of places offer pensions anymore. But getting a young 24, 25-year-old to recognize the value of what those things are, and making that the sales pitch is incredibly difficult, especially when they have a law firm that's offering them $100,000 base salary plus bonuses for cases they bring in or resolve and things like that. So that's really, really difficult. And then beyond that is keeping them. So I tell my misdemeanor division chiefs that their role is to train really good lawyers. Because one of two things is going to happen. They're going to get hooked on prosecution work, and they're going to stay, and they're going to be a career guy like me or gal like me, or they're going to go out into private practice and hang their proverbial shingle up and go make some money. And either way, I want good lawyers that I'm dealing with. You know, the public defender's office and the state attorney's office is an excellent way for young lawyers to get instant trial work, where these attorneys are in the courtroom handling thousands of cases a year, and some of them can get, you know, 10 to 15 jury trials a year if they really want to put their nose to the grindstone, and that's not something that you're going to get in civil practice. It's just not realistic. I mean, a civil attorney would be lucky to get 4 trials a year, if that. But in the criminal courtroom, you can get exposure to the evidence code, exposure to judges, exposure to all these different things, which then become invaluable to the civil firms out there. And so that's where it becomes difficult, is not only getting them to come in, is getting them to stay. And you know, that's most definitely the most difficult part, is the concern that, you know, someone's going to be prosecuting a death penalty case or a murder case, and that attorney doesn't have the experience necessary to do that.
If it helps at all, it's hard for civil attorneys to find people that want to go to trial. People just don't want to go to trial anymore. It's so fun.
You come and get them from our offices.
Yeah. Thanks for training potential future employees of the Orlando Law Group. One last question before we let you all ask a few questions. Obviously, we're a group of business owners, a business organization. Many of our companies would like to provide goods and services to your office. What is a good way to go about starting that process?
Well, I don't need any more clients, so
Yes, please.
don't get arrested. But, you know, I'm sad to say that I don't think that my office is a good business opportunity for folks out there. I mean, we basically have an office that's provided by the county, the facilities, everything like that, and the budget goes to salaries. That's what our budget goes to. It doesn't go to any other really services or products. It goes to people and salaries. If there happen to be any mental health experts out there, I definitely do hire mental health experts to do competency evaluations and hire them as experts. But there's a whole, you know, industry sort of out there of those folks who we know. But I regrettably cannot say that I'm a good business opportunity for folks out there.
Any lawyers looking for work? Yeah, it's kind of the same thing for my office. You know, the bulk of our expenses are all on salary and things like that. Mental health is a concern. It's a concern in both counties. So certainly, if there are any mental health experts that are interested in forensic exams and things like that, insanity, competency, you know, I'd love to have your information. We can see if we can work something out there. But other than that, you know, there's not really much that is needed. We get our budget from the county and the state, and we expend those resources on the things that we're allowed to expend those resources on that are necessary for our everyday function. You know, other than that, I would just encourage you all, on our Facebook page and on our social media pages and our website, I put out a monthly brief that talks about frauds and scams that can be unique to some of your clients. So if you just take a look at our website and pull that out and share that with your people and your customers, I think that's important, because we don't need any more offenders either. So the more people that we can warn to be aware of these types of frauds, the less crime that'll happen, because an ounce of prevention goes a long way. And so that's about the extent of the help that we could use. So I appreciate you.
All right, we have time for a couple questions. I know you are. But Erin has the microphone, so you got to wait for her. She got Penny first.
We'll come to you. We're going to circle the room.
She got Penny first.
Okay. Let's talk about, you were talking about the crime is down, but what about the juvenile delinquency? That's when kids make so many mistakes, their brain is not functioning yet. And so talk about the seriousness, and because I know it's a lot of money that they're
one thing that I've noticed over the years, and
delinquency.
Mr. Trettis can probably comment on it even more because he's been doing it longer than I have at 37 years, but I've noticed that there's been a shift in violent crime, the crime that is happening. It's getting younger and younger and younger. I'm not positive of the social impact of that or why that's happening. You know, I meet with different leaders in the community to try to talk to them and see if we can get those things done to try to prevent it. But what I can tell you is that the juvenile system is is different from the adult system in that the juvenile system is built for rehabilitation and attempt at prevention. It's just like any other system that's out there. It's the funding, the access to programs, it's parental involvement. It's all of those things that go into play to make it be a good system. So, you know, if you have a child that is delinquent and is engaged in criminal conduct and they're engaged in entry-level criminal conduct, the bulk of those kids are going to be fine, right? They're going to get in trouble. They're going to realize, they're going to wake up. They're going to see the inside of a detention center or the backseat of a patrol car. And those parents are going to step in and that kid's going to be corrected. He's going to be fine. The kids that are bad, the ones that are going to get direct filed or the ones that are going to end up in adult court, those kids are missing something in their home life or in their center core of people, and they're behaving a particular way that, frankly, I don't know that the juvenile system can address them, absent sending them to a level 8 or a level 10 program, which is incredibly difficult to get into unless it's a firearm or a gun offense. So, you know, that system, it's got its issues. It works the bulk of the time for most of our offenders. The school systems help a tremendous deal. They do a lot of their own discipline within, and so we don't see those cases. We have civil citation programs now that allow those cases to just stay out of the criminal system so that we're not making young kids delinquents and exposing them to it. So I would say the vast majority of the times it's working, but those kids that are engaged in gun crimes, selling drugs, and those kind of things, you know, I don't know that system is currently equipped to handle it the way we would like it to.
The only thing I would add to that is I do think it is very important to try the best you can to keep juveniles out of the criminal justice system. And one thing that surprised me many years ago is law enforcement officers would say, you know, what I see is that when these low-level, first-time offender juveniles get put into the criminal justice system, they start viewing themselves as criminals, and they start acting like it. And thankfully, I think over the years, a big effort has been made to keep first offenders, low-level first offenders, out of the juvenile courtroom. And the success rate has been amazing. Some of these programs that juveniles go into, they have a recidivism rate of like 4%, which is just almost nothing. So it is very effective, and you know, I think there's been a lot of progress in the juvenile delinquency system. Our caseload in the court system has gone down in juvenile cases in the last 15 years by 60%. So it's been effective, and I think that's the important thing, and I think Mr. Scheiner has it down correctly, which is there's a certain group of violent offenders, you know, that obviously need to go into the justice system, into the courtroom, but I do think it's important to keep low-level first offenders out of the criminal justice system, give them services to their family, which has been very effective.
All right, we have time for one more.
Could you give us, you know, we hear a lot about prosecutorial discretion. Could you give us a behind-the-scenes look at what goes into that kind of decision-making and how much it impacts?
That was on my list. I didn't get to it. Very good.
Yeah, so prosecutorial discretion, right? So with a strike of a pen, a prosecutor, an assistant state attorney, myself can charge someone with a criminal offense, right? So that's a tremendous power. And it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly, and it's something that has to be looked at. So there, as I said in the beginning, there's multiple standards in the criminal system, and the standard that's relevant to a prosecutor is the reasonable doubt standard. So in order for me to charge someone with a crime, if I'm following my ethics, I have to have a good faith basis that I can prove this case with admissible evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I don't have that, I can't file that charge because it would be a violation of my ethics and my professional responsibility. And so what goes into that review is a number of things. Was the seizure lawful, right? Was the stop and detention lawful? Was the search lawful? Different things like that. Are there witnesses to this crime? You know, a lot of times, and you know, Mr. Trettis and I see this on a regular basis, is that, you know, people will come in and say, I know that William Scheiner did this crime. Well, how do you know? Well, the streets told me. Well, the streets don't come into court and raise their right hand and testify. And so, you know, that can be incredibly frustrating to the public that everybody knows who did something, and we just don't have admissible evidence in order to prove it because, you know, A, no one's coming forward, or B, the people that have come forward have given 17 different statements about what happened. Or identified the wrong person. So that becomes incredibly difficult. So the exercise in discretion is really the disposition side. You know, we hit on it a little bit when we were talking about juveniles. There are diversionary programs. There are alternatives to prosecution that can be taken. There are different things that can be done in lieu of charging someone with a particular offense, whether it's a diversionary program, whether it's drug court, whether it's veterans court, things like that, that offenders can go to. But as it relates to the actual charging decision, it's, I have an obligation to follow the law whether I agree with it or not, and that if I can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, that's the standard. And then, is justice served in that prosecution? What are the ends here? What do the ends justify the means, kind of things? And there is a lot of discretion there, but generally speaking, it's a follow the law and an ethics standard for us.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much for your insights. I know there were a few other questions, so maybe you have a few minutes to stick around after, but let's give a round of applause for these great public servants. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know about you, but I've never missed an episode of any version of Law & Order, so I was very excited about today. I'm not joking.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the Seminole County Chamber, please visit seminolebusiness.org or check us out on our social media at Seminole County Chamber.